Carol Leonnig, are there developments?
There are. We have two sources confirming that the grand jury did not agree to indict Letitia James today. That does not mean that the Justice Department won't attempt again to do this. We've sought Department of Justice comment, and they have given us comment and not discussed the grand jury decision, not discussed the details, but have said that there should be no premature celebrations, quote unquote. But our understanding from two sources is that the grand jury did not agree to indict and charge Letitia James with mortgage fraud today.
So that's called no true bill, right? And that doesn't happen very often, but it's been happening a lot. It happened in Washington, D.C. with a lot of cases they sought to bring. Is this the first time, Carol, that we know of that it's happened in Norfolk?
You know, I don't know Norfolk as well as I know D.C. and the Southern District of New York, so I can't say with surety, but your summary that this doesn't happen very often is on the money. I remember when we were reporting for our book Injustice that Andrew McCabe was the government was seeking to prosecute him under the first Trump administration, and prosecutors were stunned that there was no true bill in that case because they couldn't remember a time that had happened before. It's very rare. And to Andrew's point, it's not just rare, it's embarrassing to the Department of Justice because precisely they don't just bring cases to win them in the grand jury. They bring cases that are so deafening and obvious and clear and convincing that the probable cause standard is an easy bar to jump.
I mean, Andrew, let me try to put this in sort of non-legal context for folks. I actually remember, this is how different the first Trump term is from the second.
Nicole,
I had a source.
I'm
go
sorry
ahead,
to
Carol.
break in. I have to go. I apologize.
Go. If you learn more, wave your arm and come back. I remember being on the phone with a senior Justice Department official when that grand jury in D.C. refused to indict, delivered the no true bill, or a refusal to indict Jim Comey. And it was a seismic blow. It reverberated around the Department of Justice. It's a marker or an indication of how shameless or hostage this DOJ leadership is to Donald Trump's political operation, that they don't seem to care that these terribly weak cases are getting rejected by grand juries. I mean, what is this? How does this reflect back on Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche today?
Well, going back to what I said about, it would be interesting to have the courts decide the vindictive and selective prosecution claims. If this reporting is accurate, that a grand jury refused to find probable cause to indict Letitia James today, that is finding vindictive and selective prosecution. As Carol mentioned and you mentioned, this does not happen. I was a prosecutor for 21 years. I never saw in the district in which I was raised a no true bill. The only time I had ever heard of a grand jury saying no to a proposed indictment is when there was almost collusion where the prosecutor actually sometimes in police cases around the country, you would see that the grand jury didn't vote to charge a police officer. And there was a real odor of that the prosecutor kind of wanted that out. And so they weren't actually rejecting what the prosecutor wanted. They were kind of carrying it out to say, yes, we presented it, but they said no, so it's not our fault. That's the only time that I'd actually ever heard of anything like this, because it shows both vindictive and selective prosecution, and it shows they're not good at it because they can't even sort of put together a cohesive case. It really is the kind of thing that you can't just say, oh, I blame the judges and I blame the juries every time you lose. At some point, you have to look at a mirror and think, it's not them, it's me. When, remember, this is the same department that couldn't and literally couldn't indict a ham sandwich in the case of someone throwing a sandwich at an agent in D.C. and the grand jury refused to indict there, so it had to be brought as a lesser charge where you didn't have to go through the grand jury. So to me, this is such a black mark on the Department of Justice and a stain on it. And it's something that it carries with them every single time they go to court, where the reason you're seeing the judges reject what's called the presumption of regularity and giving the government the benefit of the doubt is that you're seeing judges, and not so-called Biden judges, not Obama judges. You're seeing judges across the country appointed by Republicans and Democrats, including appointed by Donald Trump in his first term, rejecting what is going on here and finding that the government's representations cannot be believed. And it's this kind of conduct that it leads to that result. But I also think we have an administration that's impervious to self-reflection about what's going on.
Well, self-reflection, yes, but what about all the losing? I mean, these are people like to describe Todd Blanche as someone who comes down on the normal side. There's nothing normal about going and sitting with Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted child sex trafficker who raped underage girls and participated in sex acts with Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, Chris Christie, of all people, said that it's a highly abnormal thing for a deputy attorney general to do. She's now submitted an application for a commutation and a pardon. Under Todd Blanche's leadership, he runs the department, and they're losing. It's Keystone Cops-esque, not to insult the Keystone Cops, but they've got illegally appointed U.S. attorneys who are failing to bring the cases that Donald Trump wants most. And not to separate out the different stories. I mean, the FBI has now got a feud that has spilled into the public about opening a counterterrorism investigation into 6 lawmakers, most of them former members of the military, who told the men and women of the military not to follow any illegal orders days before we find out in the Washington Post about a double-tap strike on shipwrecked people in the Caribbean. I mean, what is the United States Department of Justice today, right now?
I would add to that litany, and by the way, you can just go on, but remember that after that interview that the Deputy Attorney General himself conducted, Ghislaine Maxwell was moved to a camp, to a low-level prison facility where the reporting is that she, unlike the other inmates there, is playing like with a puppy that is brought in to make her feel good. And this is somebody who the judge said was participating and complicit in the sexual abuse of women and minors. And that's the judge's term, and sentenced her to 20 years. You also have the Deputy Attorney General announcing in a speech to the Federalist Society that there is a war on judges. And just to be clear, that would include judges like Judge Wilkinson in the Fourth Circuit, a leading conservative who took the government to task in terms of what they were doing with Mr. Abrego Garcia, saying that this was the road to lawlessness. It includes judges like Karen Immergut on the West Coast, who said that what the government's position was in trying to justify the military being used in a domestic setting, that their views were untethered to the facts. That's her words. So these so-called rogue judges that get vilified by the likes of Stephen Miller and by the Deputy Attorney General are their own judges. These are people who should be thinking, if you lose them, what is going on? And so it's just a charade. To me, this is a Department of Justice that is just run out of the White House and is a political arm. A final example of that is when Pam Bondi announced on Fox News, I believe it was, that Mr. Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a bad guy. that sort of tells you everything you need to know about this Department of Justice. Even if that were true, it's irrelevant to whether he was entitled to due process, and the Department of Justice had to comply with a court order that said he could not be removed from this country. And so Pam Bondi knows that. She is a lawyer. She knows very well that what she was saying was a political statement to try and make people not care about him because he was being smeared. But this is the Attorney General of the United States. And so, every single thing that I was taught for 20 years is really gone by the wayside.